Hi, I'm just going to talk today about the Angular framework to build a weather app. I'm using an API website, which is at openweatherapp.org. It is a free API through which you can hit these APIs to get the weather of a particular city. So this is the website that I'm using, and you can see that the APIs are free, and all that you need to do is to set up your API key. So when you sign up, they generate an API key for you, and then you can just use that to kind of hit the APIs for different cities and get the information. So I'm just going to use this to build our Angular application. So to kind of go and build your Angular application, there's a lot of documentation under Angular, angular.io. So the first thing that you want to do is to install Angular on your machine. So you need to have Node and NPM installed on your machine. So you can kind of go in and check if you have Node and NPM installed. Let me see if I can show that to you real quick. So I can say node -v, it shows my node has been installed. And if I say npm version, it should show me my npm version. So there are like websites that you can go and check to install Node and npm. I'm not covering that in this project. The whole idea for this demo is to show you how we can build a weather map application using this endpoint. So let us get started on this course. So the first thing I want to do is to create the project. So I say ng new, and then I can call the name of the project. So I'm just going to call it weather app, and let's build this project. So let's do that. So it builds the template for you, the whole framework template. I do not want Angular routing, which means that I'm not going from one page to another. We're kind of treating this as a single page app, but for this particular project, I'm not doing any routing. Then it's asking me what kind of styling that you're going to use. I'm going to pick the default, which is CSS. And now what it's done is it's generating all the folder structure for me. This is pretty much the framework that it's building out for me as I give these parameters. So I'm just going to stop the video here before it starts building this, and then we come back and take a look at the project. So you can see the project just got built. I'm going to use my editor. I prefer using Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to go and open the project. So let's do that. You can see in a few seconds that it's just built the structure for me, the folder structure. This is pretty much the framework that you want to work off. So let's go and look at some of them pretty quickly. The main thing is the package.json. So as I built that project, you see that it kind of imported all the libraries that's needed for us. So that's what you see here. These are the commands that you're going to run, and we'll come to that a little later to show you how we can run the application. Then we're looking at the source. Under the app folder, you can see that it's in Angular, we are going to use TypeScript, which is kind of a wrapper on top of JavaScript. That's the language that we're going to use, and it's a strongly typed language like Java. You can define the data types for your variables. So we're going to use TypeScript. There's nothing right now in CSS. HTML, it's got a kind of a template for Angular that's been built. We're going to get rid of that. We are not writing any test in this, but it also builds a unit test for you as we build this project. App component, this is where most of our work is going to happen. A lot of the logic is going to be written in app component. And then finally, the app module. This is where you got to register all your libraries that you're going to use in your framework. So this is another important piece that has to be done as we kind of build these projects. So in a nutshell, this is what we have right now. Index.html, it's basically built the template to show you how this thing looks. So let's go run this real quick and see how it looks. So like I said, I can just run this as ng, probably the wrong place, ng serve. So it's going to compile, and I can hit localhost 4200 and take a look as what how does this application look at this point. It's just a template. It's just a basic template of Angular. But we can just take a look at that. It's just building this. I'm just going to stop this for a second until it compiles it. So now that it's compiled successfully, let's go and look at what it looks like right now. So if I hit localhost 4200, you can see that this is the screen that you see. This is coming off from this massive HTML that it generates for us, but we're not going to use this at this point in time. Before I kind of go and clean that up, let me show you a few other things here that might be helpful. One of the things that I can run is, like I said, I ran ngserve for me to build up bring up the app. The other thing that I can do is nglint is to check if your syntax and your indentation is correct in terms of your code. Since we haven't touched anything, it came out saying that our indentation or format of the code is correct in terms of the syntax. So that's what lint does. ng end-to-end is running. Angular has got its own inbuilt end-to-end framework that it can run. It's probably using Karma as its end-to-end library, and what it's doing is right now it's going to build a library, and then it's just going to run the test for you. So you can see that the screen pops up, and it's just ran localhost 4200 successfully. It was so fast that it ran just the basic things. It's running what is there in this library, or rather, this is the unit test, sorry. So this basically ran an end-to-end test. So let's run the unit test now, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if I go into package.json, and if I run ng test, so this is the unit test that it's executing what is there here, which was kind of generated as we built the library or the framework. It just came off the shelf. So you can see that it's executing the unit test. So it's a very handy framework. It comes with all the bells and whistles that you need. You don't have to hand code a lot of things. It comes with a lot of template-driven libraries and code, and then you just have to start building on it. So, okay, so now what I'm kind of doing is here, I'm building a header, or it's a folder structure called header. So it's going to build a header CSS and header HTML and also an header component. I'm saying I don't want a spec file. I'm not writing a test on this. So I'm just going to run this, and you can see that it'll build a header folder under this app. So what this does is it's saying Angular create a header folder with these components under apps. So that's what it's going to do. So let me run that real quick. So it did complain about it's saying spec false. It doesn't seem to like that. So I'm going to do sp false and see if that works. Yeah, looks like that that kind of worked here. But for some reason, it created the header. I'm just going to delete this. I don't need the header for spec file for that. So you can see that it has the header component, which is the CSS, the HTML, and the TypeScript. So under HTML, I'm going to say app header works, and under app component, I need to probably make this change here. So I'm going to get rid of all this. This is the Angular page that we saw, which was built off this HTML. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to call this app header. You will see why shortly. So I'm just going to call this app header. And then on the header.component, I can leave this as is for now just to show you, or I can also, okay, let's do this. Let's call this, instead of header works, I'm just going to say div class equals header, and then equals header, so it needs it in quotes, right? So that's that, and I'm going to put this div here, right? And I'm just going to call this div here. Let's make this a little big, so I'll call this as h1. I'll just call this h1, and then maybe call this with a nice heading. Let's call this weather app, right? And then on the CSS, let me kind of go in and put in this values in there. Oops. So I call it header. Right, and then position, I can say absolute. Guys, these are all like just basic CSS. This course is not for CSS, but I'm just going to add this in there so that it gives a better positioning and color to it, much more better styling. So that's what I'm doing. Say color, I'm just going to say something like maybe just blue, right? And then I can say the paddings, I just say, right, for now I can just say 0. Top can be 0 pixel at this point. Just not doing anything there. Left, that's that. Padding, oops, padding, just going to say 1 EM. Then text align, I'm just going to center this, right? So we did that. So what this is it's basically the class, right? The class header is what I'm defining in CSS. I don't want to do it in line. I want to handle it through the CSS file itself. So there is a few gotchas here I want to kind of clarify. One of the things that you want to make sure is that this selector sometimes says false header, because this came from when we kind of created the header. We said -sp false. So you need to correct this as app header. You also need to make sure that your app component has this app header. So what it's saying is that you're referencing your main HTML from this header. So this header basically gets picked up by this app component.html. So let's run this. So if I kind of go in here, kill this and say ngserve again, So I'm running ngserve, and it's going to build that soon as it's compiling and building. If I go in here and look at that now, so I'm just refreshing it. You can see it's nicely centered as weather app. So it built that out for you very nicely because of all the CSS styling. So now that we have built the header piece, now let's start building the component itself. We want to make sure that we have some input text here. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to build, it's called a container. So this is all Bootstrap. So I'm just, you can kind of look at some of the Bootstrap components that is available out there, and then kind of go through it if you feel that it's a little overwhelming. It took me a while to kind of understand it, but it's not too difficult. You might have to just spend some time to understand bootstrapping. And then I'm just going to do this here. This is the line break. I just want a line break. So what I'm trying to build is like, you need to input a city. So I'm trying to input a city here. So I'm just going to say input, input type equals text. And then I'm going to do a break. Type equals text, and then I'm just going to break this, and then br, and then I'm just going to do 2 buttons just to get a sense of how it looks. And then I'm just going to say button. Right now I just say get weather. That's the label on it, right? Get weather. So I did that, and then one more. Let's say button. And then I'm just going to say clear. So we want to clear if you entered a bad value for the city. So let's see how this looks before we kind of go further. And also I wanted to change this to, I just want to make this gap maybe. Okay. And let's see how this looks. I don't know if this works. Let's try that first. It didn't like a few things. Let's fix it. So it looks like I fixed it. The line break cannot have a /. So that was that. So you can see I want to enter some input value in the text for the city, and then I want to hit the get weather to call the API, and then it should return saying that what's the weather for that city. Or if I entered a bad value, I should just be able to hit clear and it should clear it out. So this is what front end is all about. We just kind of build the UI and then kind of improve on it. So I'm going to stop this video here, and then I'll come back in the next video for building this out and structuring it better. All right? Talk to you. Bye. So I went and modified or kind of made it a little pretty since last time when we saw the UI. So I went and added this into the CSS file. Since this class is not about CSS, if you have any interest in like learning CSS, you can also look at my code in GitHub, which I would upload this a little later, and then you can take a look at it there. So this was where we were with the HTML. So if I go back in there and look at it now, you can see that it's much more cleaner. So the other thing that I want to kind of start building now is that if I enter instead of London, I have a bad typo. if I hit clear button, it should go and clear this. So that's what I'm going to build now first, and then we can come back to the get weather and build the actual API. So let's come into the app component, and then I need to see, it's already defined this variable for me called title, which came as we built the template. If you don't say if it's a string or a number, it considers it as any. I'm just not going to change that now. The next thing I want to define is a variable called city, and I want it to be a string. And probably another one called input city. So this is which is what gets entered into the text box, and I'll call that string. And there's something called binding in Angular. There's like one-way binding, two-way binding, and it's something that you might have to kind of go through Angular to understand it. It's not something that I can finish in one of these classes. So I'm kind of doing a binding on this input city. You will see this a little bit more. So this is where you can get that information as you scroll. It's a decorator, and it's basically binding the input property onto your DOM, onto your HTML. So that's what I've done here. I'm just calling it input. It probably needs a camel case, so I'm just going to do that. Now, let me write a method for this. So when I click the clear button, it should go and clear whatever is there on in the text that I've entered in the text box. So I can probably call it clear status or something, or clear input. I'll just call it clear status because we are kind of checking for the status, which I'll come back later. So I say this input city. So city equals null. So I'm just going to clear it up when I hit the clear button. So that's what we're going to do here. Then I'm going to go into the HTML of app component and then introduce that in here. So this is where what I was talking about the binding. What I'm trying to do here is the binding on the method. So when I say an action of click, when I click on the button, I'm going to call the method. So I'm going to say clear status. I think that's what it was called, right? So if I go in here, I'm just going to call the method, which will kind of go and make it a null. So we have defined this input city here as a string. It just goes, and when I go and click on it, it's going to make it null. So let's try this out and see if this works. So I'm just going to go in here, click on that, and then new terminal. Let's see what happens. Ngserve, oops, Ngserve. So it's kind of going to build that now. Didn't like something. Let's see. Okay, the port is already in use. Let me go and kill the port. So folks, that I basically told you guys that the 4200 port was kind of held up, so I had to go and kill it. So the command that you can use is sudo kill and then -t and 4200. So this is a Linux command. You can kind of Google it and find it. And I just killed that port, and because sometimes when you have multiple tabs open and you're hitting the same port, you can run into that issue. So that's what I did. And I also kind of went in and kind of changed that to see that I see the caps coming out. And now I can go and enter something. And when I click clear, that's not really clearing. So what's happening here? So we have to introduce what is called the data binding that I'd spoken to you earlier. So what that needs to happen is that for the forms that we are creating, this is called um, a, a sandwich bun, like a bun inside a so it's like two brackets inside a square bracket. And then you need to introduce this thing called ng model. This is the two-way data binding for any forms that you're creating. And then you need to provide your variable, which is the input city. So which comes from here, right? So let's me go and show you that to have some clarity on it. Nav component TS. So the input city, so the data binding that we have created here. So you need to provide that in your app component.html. So ng model is pretty much what you have. So you can see some documentation here on how to use ng model. So you need to kind of look through this to kind of get some idea of how you want to use this, but it's not too difficult. Like you see that what I'm doing here is that I'm just referencing that ng model and then calling that variable in here, which references this data binding property. So that's pretty much what we have. So when I add this data binding, let's go and try this. I've just compiled it. Let's go back here, just refresh the page. And then I'm just going to type in some value and then just clear. So you see that it starts clearing the screen. So what we did is just to recap. Let's go into the app component.ts. I have this clear status, and I'm saying that this input city equals to null, which means if I enter a bad value, I just have to clear the screen. So I come in here, and if I look at my app component.html in the text box, I have done this data binding with the input city, and then when I click on the clear status method, it goes and puts in null or clears the screen. So that's what is happening here, just to recap. So if I just go in and type in something else and just hit the clear button, and it should go away. And just to make sure everything is clean in your console. So now, folks, we are coming to the real work where we need to kind of make sure that we can hit this API, and you see that this is response object. We're going to pick a few values from this and show it on the screen. So one of the things that we would probably be looking at is the weather. It could be like the description, like an overcast clouds, and then also probably the city that we are looking for, or the country name. Let's see if there's something that we can look here for. So this is the city. It also has, I can see probably it's name of the country, I think. I mean, this probably is what we're kind of looking at. So we can kind of grab whatever data we want and display it on the screen. And that's what we're going to do in the coming section, which is the core of this project that we're trying to demo. So, so let's catch up in the next video. Okay, so let's start building the actual API now, and that's the core part of what we're trying to build here. I'm going to call this fetch weather API as the method name, and let's start building this. So I'm going to have this thing called the city, which we have defined there as the input city. So we're kind of going to store the value that comes into the text box somewhere, right? So once that is done, I need to also include the construct for this. So if when I go and introduce the construct, so I can say after this thing is defined, I can say constructor private, constructor private, and then I have to define the HTTP. So this is the Angular core library that we have to use for any HTTP REST calls that we are making. So since this has not been defined, I have to go up and define them. So I can do import, import, and then I can say HTTP client, HTTP client from Angular common HTTP. So this is where I should find it. So you can see that I've introduced the HTTP client library to kind of handle this. So I say this input city, and when I kind of load the application, I want to make sure that it displays something in the text box. So I'm saying enter city. So you're here with me so far, I guess. There's nothing significant happening here. So once that is done, let's go into the method now, and let's introduce the parameters that we need to pass into the API. So this is basically the city name and the API key. So I'm just instantiating the params, and then let's set the params. So I'm going to say the search params. So that's an inbuilt, we have kind of instantiated that, and now we say search params dot set, and it looks for this value q when we kind of search for it. So we do that, and then you have this backtick. You need to do a backtick to, so you have this backtick to kind of fill in your city name. So it has, like, you know, if you go back here and look at it, right? So we are trying to do this piece, and then we need to do the app ID. So that's what I'm trying to build here. Then I'm saying search params equals search params dot set. So you can see that I've added my API keys, and then I'm kind of defining this endpoint, which is what we're trying to hit. And then I'm passing in the parameter in here, which I've set above. So that's pretty much what we have built at this point. And then I need to close this. And then I need to do something called a pipe. And then I say map, and then I'm going to get the response data. I'm going to say response data, and then we're going to fetch that response. So folks, you might be seeing some new concepts here called pipe and map. Map comes from reactable JavaScript, RxJS. This is the library that we're using to do that. And then I have a little bit of a documentation that you can go through to kind of understand the various implementation that is being provided here. So this is all for pretty much all the endpoints, how we want to implement the a response object, and how are you going to kind of capture that response object. And the other concept that you're going to hear is called observables. Observables is something where when a page is getting loaded, things happen immediately, right? So, but in observable, it basically says, hey, I'm going to hold on and see when you kind of hit an endpoint, what is the request that you're sending, and I'm also going to watch what is the response that's coming back. And that's what is called observables in Angular. So there's a couple of these concepts that's been introduced. One is the map, and then one is the pipe, and the other one is the observables that I'm talking about. So I'm going to create an array called anything. I just call it something like post array or something. And this is where the data of the response object will be held. So I'm talking about what is called the observables. So we have sent out the API with a GET request, which means we're reading it. And then the data that's coming back, we have to do something with that. So just kind of stay with me here, and I'm going to kind of explain this a little bit to tell you what this is doing. But like I said, there are various implementation of this. This is one of the approaches that I took. You could probably take a different approach to how you want to implement this. So I'm just saying if response data has own property, and then it has a key, which is a key value pair that you have in the response object. And when that comes through, what do you want to do? So you want to push the data that the post array receives. So the response object that comes back is stored in this post array, and then you are, this looks a little complicated, but it's just that the implementation, you can consider this like a boilerplate code in Angular. I mean, you could use the same kind of implementation for any other endpoints that you're hitting for a third-party API, like the weather API that I'm hitting. And you could just use this piece of logic to make that happen. Okay, so we have got our response object. So we want to extract that now. So let's do that. The equal to post arrays 0 index, and then we want to get the weather. We will look at this response object after I finish this, and it'll give you a better sense of what I'm doing here. So let's finish this, and then I want to do the description. And then let's do the start country. I think we have already defined this. Let's look at that. Post arrays, post arrays, 0th index, and then we traverse through, and then on the response object, and then get the country. And then we also just, let's do a console log just to get a sense of how this looks on a network panel. So let's do console log, and then just say display weather or something, right? Display weather, and then maybe just have a space here, and then let's say this dot city weather, right? City. I think I'm not define city weather. Let's go do that in a bit. So that's that, and then yeah. So and then you can do also console log, right? And then we just do country, and then this this dot country, right? Yeah, and once that's done, let's return the post arrays dot 0, and then let's close this with get two brackets, and then I think square bracket. We'll just look through this. So I think let me go and define the city weather. I think I don't have that here, so let's go up. Yeah, let's do city weather. Let's call that string, right? Also, I don't think so. We have the country, so let's do that as string. Yeah, so we should be good with that. .sys. Let's see if we need. I don't think so. You need sys. Okay, so let's save this. So let's look at what I was kind of extracting from the post array response object. So I'm looking at the weather description, and the other piece that I'm extracting is from this root of sys, and then I want the country. So that was what I was kind of extracting from this piece. Let's go back there and take a look at it once more. So you can see that I had weather and description, and then the post arrays, and I want to extract the node sys, and it has country under that. So, and then I'm storing that, and all that I'm doing is I'm returning it back. And then when I say subscribe, it's basically observables is saying that the notification has come back for the response object, and then you're just displaying it at this point. I'm just console logging it just to see how it looks. So let's see how this looks. I just kind of compiled it, and if I go back here, so there is still a few things that has to happen. Like, I mean, you see that it is initializing this from the constructor to say enter city. And now even if I do the clear, it's still working, but the get weather is still not working. It doesn't still know where to look for this API. So what we are missing right now is to go into our HTML and then call that get weather. The other thing that I also wanted to show you is that once I built this method out, I am kind of referencing that on init. So what this method basically is doing is that whenever the page loads for the first time, it's calling this API, and that's how you're seeing this value come in the enter city, because the constructor is initialized, and you see that it's prompting you to enter a city in the text box. So and you have to also be mindful of that every library that you're making use in your app component has to be registered in the app module.ts. So I did add this HTTP client module, which has been referenced in our app component. And also it has to be added in two places, one here in the imports, and then you've got to actually import the library from Angular. So these are the few things that you have to keep in mind for it to compile correctly. Let's kind of fix the HTML from here, and then so you can see that I kind of added that method into my click event for get weather, so that it knows that it has to go and execute this method to get the data. So as we have kind of looked at this piece where we have defined the post array as a key value pair object to hold the key value pair object, and then we are kind of looping through to grab all the data from the response object, all this data that comes comes through, we are kind of capturing that, and then we are kind of storing them, and then we want to pick a few of them and kind of display it on the screen. So we are looking for the city weather and then the country. We are also kind of displaying them just to, for debugging purpose, and you can remove them later on your console log to see how the data looks. And then the same thing with once the response object comes back, we want to look at how the data looks, and then we need to go back into our HTML and then kind of build the data for country and city so that you can display that on the screen. So that's the piece that's remaining. And also we'll talk about how we want to handle the error. So what happens is, in the first time when we're loading this page, it's going to go and hit this because it's going to go call this method, and then it's going to go hit this API, and it doesn't find the city, so it's going to complain saying that it's a 404. So we need to also handle that here, which we would do shortly. So let's go take a look to see how this looks at this point. Like as you see that, you can see that it gives a 404 because it doesn't know what is the city. There's no name called enter city. So say let's go and enter, say Houston or something, right? And see how the data looks. And if I hit get weather, there you go. So you can see that the data is coming into our network log, and we can just go and extract whatever we were deciding to kind of extract from here. So we want to extract the country, and then we want to also extract the description. So all that data is here, and we just want to bring it onto the screen and show it here. So that's the piece that's remaining, and also how we want to handle this error. Okay, so let's so now let's do the error piece. So let's build the error logic for this. So I'm just going to do error, and let's do the callback function, and let's say console dot error. So I'm just going to display it to say that you know, city not found, right? And then also have the city dot weather, which you will know what I'm trying to do in a few minutes when I build this. So I'll explain this to you. This dot error message. So I don't think so I have this defined yet. So let's go and define that here. Error message, and put string, and that should take care of that. I don't see that error anymore. So let's go into my HTML and then start extracting and displaying our city and country. So let's do this. And this is an Angular directive that you would have to look it up. This course is not going to show you what that is. So bear with me. I will show you some documentation around it so that you can just read up a little bit and understand what it is. It's not too complicated once you kind of understand why this is used. So error message. So I'm doing an if-else condition here. So bear with my typo here. Else error message, and then I close that. And let's get this out here, and then let's do a break. And then now I'm kind of going to introduce this thing called status on the page. So, and then I'm going to say, let's extract out. This is the binding that we talked about. We're just going to do one-way binding to get the data which is the city weather, right? So let's do that. And then, so we did the if condition. So if you guys want some understanding about it, you can look at it in Angular. So it's going to say an if condition, and then you can do your else part of it, right? So that's what I'm doing here. And something similar for your ng template. What is a template directive? You can kind of get that information here. It's also used in the if-else condition. Templates, Angular uses template under the hood, but you can also explicitly specify templates and use it in your if-else condition, because you could have something that is done within your Angular under the hood template, but then you want to handle something else outside of it, and that's where you use the ng template. So you can kind of read up a little bit on this to understand how the ng template directive is used. So you can see here that I've also added an if condition for country. The same thing. If it's a country, I'm just going to display country, and here for city weather. And then this is where I'm kind of using the template, because if you don't find the city weather, I want it to display an error message. So that's under this tag of Angular template that I have it as an error message. So we can kind of also look at how we want to display the CSS for this, right? So we also want to make sure that it has some kind of, like a danger alert kind of a thing that shows that this is what is happening. So I'm going to go into app component and also do the error message for this. So I can say error message. I think that's what I called it. I can go and check. I can have the color first as red, right? Because you want to kind of say, hey, it's danger, something is wrong, kind of a thing, right? So that and image. Font family, right? Red. Oops. Bear with me, guys. I'm kind of it's a little challenging with CSS if you're kind of using some of these that you're not too familiar with. So I'm just going to get this going. Font size, we just say 13 pixel. And then font weight, just make it bold, right? Let's make this bold so that it gives a little bit more of a presence that something is wrong. Line height, okay, 20 pixel, and then let's say there's something called text shadow. You can say 1 pixel on the left, 1 pixel, right? And then you can say RGB. You can do the same. The green, blue, red, 250, 250, and 0.3. Okay. So yeah, just wanted to get this out of the way so that we can kind of look at it and see how it works. So let's go into terminal. Okay, and I'm going to save everything here and then say ngserve. Okay, so it's going to run that. Let me look at how this looks. So I need to make sure. Yeah, so I can see that it comes back with something called city not found because it's a 404, right? And then if I say London, how does it show? Get weather. Yeah, so it says broken clouds, country is Great Britain. So we can see it coming in through nicely. So the city not found. We should fix this. It should not show Britain. Let's say Houston, get weather, overcast cloud, country US. What about Beijing? So you can see clear sky. So you can see that the data is coming through, just some minor fix that we need to do to get this going. And if you say test, it just clears, but we also need to clear this. So there's a few minor things that we can clear up, but now you can see that the data is coming back. So that's really cool. Yeah, so you can see all the data coming back, scattered clouds, and it's in US. So perfect. So I just cleaned it up a little more. So when I say clear status, I want it to display enter the city. And then I also want to not show anything for the country. So those are the few things that I cleaned up. Let's kind of go and look at it once more and see how it looks. So if I hit refresh it, it comes back with something called city not found because it's a 404, right? And then if I say London, how does it show? Get weather. Yeah, so it says broken clouds, country is Great Britain. So we can see it coming in through nicely. So the city not found. We should fix this. It should not show Britain. Let's say Houston. Get weather, overcast cloud, country US. What about Beijing? So you can see clear sky. So you can see that the data is coming through, just some minor fix that we need to do to get this going. And if you say test, it just clears, but we also need to clear this. So there's a few minor things that we can clear up, but now you can see that the data is coming back. So that's really cool. Yeah, so you can see here that I've also added an if condition for country. The same thing. If it's a country, I'm just going to display country and here for city weather. And then this is where I'm kind of using the template because if you don't find the city weather, I want it to display an error message. So that's under this tag of Angular template that I have it as an error message. So we can kind of also look at how we want to display the CSS for this, right? So we also want to make sure that it has some kind of, like a danger alert kind of a thing that shows that this is what is happening. So I'm going to go into app component and also do the error message for this. So I can say error message. I think that's what I called it. I can go and check. I can have the color first as red, right? Because you want to kind of say, hey, it's danger, something is wrong, kind of a thing, right? So that and image, font family, right? Red. Oops. Bear with me, guys. I'm kind of it's a little challenging with CSS if you're kind of using some of these that you're not too familiar with. So I'm just going to get this going. Font size, we just say 13 pixel. And then font weight, just make it bold, right? Let's make this bold so that it gives a little bit more of a presence that something is wrong. Line height, Okay, 20 pixel, and then let's say there's something called text shadow. You can say 1 pixel on the left, 1 pixel, right? And then you can say RGB. You can do the same. The green, blue, red, 250, 250, and 0.3. Okay. So yeah, just wanted to get this out of the way so that we can kind of look at it and see how it works. So let's go into terminal. Okay, and I'm going to save everything here and then say ngserve. Okay, so it's going to that. Let me look at how this looks. So I need to make sure. Yeah, so I can see that it comes back with something called city not found because it's a 404, right? And then if I say London, how does it show? Get weather. Yeah, so it says broken clouds, country is Great Britain. So we can see it coming in through nicely. So city not found. We should fix this. It should not show Britain. Let's say Houston, get weather, overcast cloud, country US. What about Beijing? So you can see clear sky. So you can see that the data is coming through, just some minor fix that we need to do to get this going. And if you say test, it just clears, but we also need to clear this. So there's a few minor things that we can clear up, but now you can see that the data is coming back. So that's really cool. Yeah, so you can see all the data coming back, scattered clouds, and it's in US. So perfect. So I just cleaned it up a little more. So when I say clear status, I want it to display enter the city. And then I also want to not show anything for the country. So those are the few things that I cleaned up. Let's kind of go and look at it once more and see how it looks. So if I hit refresh it, so there's nothing under the city, so it's saying city not found on initial load. And then if I say London, it should hit it. So it gives you what's the weather there and which country it is from. If I do clear, this is where I did that, where when I say clear status, it goes and puts in null values and clears this up and tells you to enter the city. So a little nice display or description of what the user has to do. So yeah, these are the things that you can do with Angular. You can just hit a third-party API and then get the response object and then display whatever you want on the screen, and that kind of builds an application. So a lot of companies kind of do that. They do it from the back end, probably using Java or PHP or C#, and then they kind of push that data into the front end, and then the front end consumes whatever is needed and gets displayed on the screen. That's one approach. This is an approach where it's done totally in Angular. I just wanted to show you all how some of these things can also be handled on the front end. Purely as an Angular framework, and that's what we have done in this particular project. I mean, it's sky's the limit from here. You can do whatever you want to do on from using Angular. It's a single page and start using it. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this course. So it kind of gives you a perspective of what Angular is all about. So yeah, thank you so much for being patient. I know this has been a long course. I could not kind of show it in just one video. I thought I'll just break it into a couple of sessions and then show this video to you all. So okay, happy holidays and have a safe holidays. Thank you. Last but not the least, I have kind of uploaded this into my GitHub. It is public, so if you go into Naveen Krishnan 01 and Weather App, you can see my code base here, and then you can just clone it and use it or fork it and use it. So whatever works for you. And also, a note of caution that when you're kind of uploading your code, don't upload your API key for the weather map, because there's a potential that somebody can misuse it using your API key. They could just download it a million times and then they might stop providing you access because somebody kind of misused it. So just something to keep in mind. So don't push any of your keys into GitHub. And so, yeah, enjoy and see if this works out for you guys. Thank you so much for watching this course. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Bye.